Okay, so I don't know exactly how these things work, but I guess I'll start with a bit of the backstory. So right now, Joshua and I are reading the book for our next episode. We're going to do another one of those half and half setups. I was reading my half, I was taking notes, trying to form cohesive thoughts, and I'm noticing this trend where I see everything through the lens of Empress Theresa. Every note I've made is, oh, this is just like Norman's voice. This sounds like something Theresa would do, but it's also not just the podcast, it's in my real life too. I think of Empress Theresa when I'm consuming media for fun, when I read the news, conceive of my universe. I caught myself using the word golly gee drillion unironically. I filled my brain with Empress Theresa facts. So while we're between episodes, I figure I'll put my affliction to good use and get some content out of it. I asked Joshua to make one of those iceberg memes just to see how far I can go when it comes to Empress Theresa facts. I don't really know what his source was for this stuff or what sticks out in his head versus in mine. We'll see how it goes. Okay, level 1, complete normie, not even touching the tip of the iceberg. First up, we have Exodus. So, I am an Empress Theresa scholar, not a biblical scholar, but it would not surprise me in the slightest to learn that Norman Boutin is only familiar with the second book of the Old Testament. Basically, in the second half of Empress Theresa, where the novel takes on a picaresque structure where Theresa goes around solving world problems, she gets around to Israel, which is at any moment going to be completely overrun by its enemies. So to stop the Israeli conflict once and for all, she creates a new island in the middle of the ocean and forces the entire population of Israel to march over a land bridge into Crete, I think, where they will then be airlifted into this new island. And I think it also comes up in the North Korea arc a little bit too. Basically, any time where there is a group of people that Theresa either doesn't like or doesn't want to deal with, her solution is Exodus. We will move them somewhere else. Up next, we have Theresa as villain. Now, I'm pretty sure what Joshua means here is what I guess I would call baby's first Empress Theresa hot take. Basically, you can view all of the events of Empress Theresa and just draw the conclusion that Theresa is evil the whole time and she is not using her powers for the greater good. Now, I have some problems with this view of things. I do think that obviously she has more flaws than a lot of the other characters are willing to admit. But to outright call her a villain or evil, I think kind of undermines Theresa's naivete in her desire to help other people. Blair. My boy, Peter Blair, is probably the most omnipresent and useless character in all of the book. He is the Prime Minister of Britain, and everything he says or does is either expository or makes him sound like a literal child. I love that part when Theresa makes this stupid James Bond joke and they're like on this national TV broadcast interview and she and Peter Blair just sing the James Bond theme song. I don't know why that is so funny to me, but I love Peter Blair. Paris. My favorite arc of the whole story. Imagine you're Theresa and you are tasked with saving the world from destruction. Everyone's waiting on you to make things right again, and we only have a little bit less than a year before everything is lost forever. So what's the first thing you do? Well, if you are Theresa, it would be go on a vacation to Paris, which you will then proceed to complain about the entire time, talking about how waiters in fancy restaurants wouldn't even acknowledge your existence because you were dressed up like a tourist, or how much you didn't like the Louvre and were underwhelmed by Mona Lisa, which, To be fair, I kind of see where Norman is coming from with this one. I have to tell you guys the story. This is a true story. I'm desperate for anyone to tell me what could have possibly happened in this situation. I swear this happened exactly as I'm telling you. We were in Paris, we weren't underdressed, and we also weren't even at that fancy of a restaurant, but it was like a Japanese sushi restaurant, and our waiter was this stoic, completely silent Japanese man. He took our order and everything was fine and dandy, and then while we were waiting for our food, he gives us a bowl of what look like, and we later eat and realize that they are, Pringles potato chips. Now, obviously, my first thought is that this is like some hilarious joke because we're Americans, but like the waiter never came back and was like, "How did you like your appetizer, you filthy cochon?" So like, I just don't know what the mentality was there. So I have pretty mixed feelings about Paris, and this is something that gets brought up a lot when people talk about what happens in Empress Theresa. So I think that's a pretty good candidate for bird's eye view. And finally, we have the wind, which is probably what I should have started on, because this problem that Theresa creates kind of forms the spine of a lot of the novel, even through the picaresque scenes. Well, I should probably start with what the wind actually means. When Theresa is first discovered by the government, the FBI, CIA, whatever, abducts Theresa and loads her on a plane in a very long and protracted scene, and they shove her off into the ocean where they are going to nuke her. And because of the way Hal works, Hal associates the wind rushing past her face with danger. So Hal shuts off all wind across the earth. When Theresa wakes up, she is facing a world in danger of starvation and, I guess, general pandemonium because of all the things that the wind does. This one is interesting to me just because of its prevalence, as well as the fact that it never really goes away. Theresa never just gets Hal to start the wind outright. She just comes up with new workarounds for the problems that she's facing, and then when something inevitably goes wrong, she incrementally changes it kind of over and over and over to where she just fundamentally changes the way that everything in the world works, which we will hopefully get to in our lower tiers. Okay, part 2. We are getting to the iceberg proper. Now we're really going to have to put our Empress Theresa caps on for these ones. Let me read from the other side now, because I think I need to jump around more. These aren't necessarily in any particular order. Let's start with this one. Good one to start with. Catholicism. Now, it is no secret that Norman Boutin is an exceptionally religious person, and by process, so is his creation, Theresa, and pretty much every character in the entire book. But I think it's important to acknowledge that he is specifically a Catholic. The Catholic Church features very heavily into Theresa's upbringing, as well as her general life philosophies. And the prayers that she says in certain points are very specifically Catholic prayers. And all of this informs the cultural context under which Empress Theresa was created. Coke bottles. I don't know why, but this is one of my favorite little details of the entire story. You remember in level 1, we were talking about how Theresa gets abducted as like an 18-year-old girl and put on a plane where they will fly her up into the ocean, throw her into the ocean, and then nuke her, right? She comes up with a plan while she's being transferred during this overly long series of events where she amasses Coke bottles. She gets 12 Coke bottles in total and empties them and puts them in a garbage bag. And for some reason, they just let her do this. Let me see if I can pull the quote real quick. Okay, I grabbed 12 bottles and put them on my tray. The men guarding me dismissed this as the irrational behavior of someone who knew she'd die in hours. One could not expect much better. Which I guess, you know, whatever. And I think like this becomes like a famous jump that like daredevils try to repeat, but obviously that really doesn't go anywhere. Irish ancestry. This is a very interesting socio-cultural point in Empress Theresa. Theresa Sullivan is of American Irish ancestry, but still Theresa seems like oddly fixated on her Irish ancestry and aware of it in a way that, at least in my experience, is uncommon. She wears a flattering Irish green dress when she's doing her interview with Peter Blair, and they like play Danny Boy at her funeral. It's all, and she goes to Ireland. It's all very weird, the fixation that she has for it. I mean, anecdotally, I'm like 100% ethnically Scottish, but I don't think I would go around wearing a kilt. It's just not common to be this fixated on your cultural heritage, which makes me wonder why Norman decided to make that such a point. Given the name Boutin, I can't imagine that he's particularly Irish. Maybe it's a Catholic thing. I'm honestly kind of curious where that all comes from. Okay, so here we have Endless Summer, and I knew there would be something that I wasn't quite sure on, because Theresa shifts the axis of the Earth to give the Earth endless summer, and I don't even remember why she did it. I think it had something to do with crops and the Earth starving or whatever. You know, I'm not much of an agrarian, but I can't imagine that is a good thing for any kind of plant ever. So it's just an interesting little tidbit, an extra little spice that Theresa gave the Earth after becoming its god. Finally, we have the original 2013-2014 covers. Man, the things I would do for a first edition Empress Theresa. Hold on, let me see if I can actually pull it up. If I go to Empress Theresa cover, see if I can find it. Yeah, so in the first version, we have, honestly, I think a better face overall, but I think Norman definitely put his own spin on human female anatomy, but far be it for me to critique him. You know, I don't think I could do any better. And here is honestly my favorite, because it's so much more interesting from an outsider art standpoint. We have a pretty, I guess this is her modestly dressed Irish outfit or whatever, and we have like an annotated collage of events, which I think is just really charming. If you've ever made like a book as a little kid out of folded paper and staples, this seems like the kind of thing that you'd put on the cover. I just like it. I unironically like it. You look at this and you know everything that you're in for. So I like the new final cover, but I do have a special place in my heart for this original one. Now we have descended below the depths. And by the looks of this guy's hair, this is kind of weird to know, but still not worthy of getting stuffed into a locker. Let's start with this big one. Hal equals childhood trauma. So this is Baby's second Empress Theresa hot take, but this one I think is a little deeper than just assuming that Theresa is a villain. The way that Theresa first gets Hal is a white ball enters her body, and she has to keep it a secret, and adults ask her really invasive questions about it, and she doesn't quite seem to know exactly what to do with it. It's not crazy to think that maybe Hal might represent something that Norman or Theresa have buried deep within their subconscious. Let me see if I can pull the quote where Jan is like interrogating her about Hal in the first place. Oh God, I actually don't want to read this because this is just straight up dialogue with no tags, but I'm going to do it anyways. I'm not good at voices, so I'm just gonna try to play this out. What happened before the fire trucks came? There was no use denying something happened. They already knew. I saw a fox walking near the water. It came up close to me and a white thing jumped out of it. That's all. Where did the white thing go? In me. Jesus. How big was this white thing? Like a softball. Did it come from the fox? Yup, came right out. What part of the fox? The stomach. How did it jump out at you? It moved into my stomach. I wasn't very enthusiastic about telling the story. Yeah, no kidding, Theresa. Jan Struthers had to force it out of me one tiny piece at a time. I don't know, something about that interrogation is really weird from a tonal and implication perspective. Let's now move on to the little one behind it. Papist scholarship, which is a really funny way of saying that the Catholic Church funded Theresa's college education. To be honest, they don't really have any reason to do that other than the vague notion that Theresa might be important one day and she's already Catholic, so... But whatever, I mean, if the Pope wants to pay for her college education, he can. Targeting reticule. So when Theresa first gets her powers, there's this very brief, well, maybe not that brief in comparison to the sheer immensity of crap that's about to happen, fun and games montage where, among other things, Theresa notices that now she has a dot in the center of her field of vision at all times. And through this, she is able to have perfect aiming when she throws things, which she uses to be very, very good at softball. I do not think that the targeting reticule matters for the entire rest of the story, but man, does she really harp on it and learn a lot about it in the first couple chapters. Norman's fixations. This honestly is something I would have put way lower because of the sheer extent I think Norman as a person permeates this entire story. Just to be clear, I'm not talking about the political leanings, which are very, very apparent. I am using fixation as a euphemism. Now, obviously, there are the easy examples of the little black nothing dress, and I think pretty much every other dress Theresa wears, where it describes her showing off her figure and talking about her body. But the way that it's a detail that Theresa gets long flowing hair because Hal helps her retain water, as well as the thing with Joan of Arc's hair, is interesting to me. I don't know, you don't hear about a guy with a thing for hair that often, but the wires can get crossed somewhere, and when you read these passages, you kind of have to wonder. Just out of curiosity, I was looking back at it, and Theresa says this early on. I would graduate from high school at 17. Part of the decision to let me skip a year was my hair. It started growing very thick after Hal came around. I mean, you could grab a handful of my hair and feel the weight like it was wet. Mom was sure this was a sign of my change of life, and I needed to be with girls my own emotional age. I don't know about you guys, but I don't necessarily conflate hair with maturity. And the fact that Norman does is a very, very slippery slope that I do not think has good implications. But what do I know? His website is getting shut down or never updated again, and I don't even think he's had much internet presence since then, so I don't know if we'll ever know anything about this. Alright, we're getting deep now. Looks like this is the level of... This guy kind of looks like every guy who thinks Guts from Berserk is literally him. So let's start out with this one down here. Shark Massacre. So we've talked about how Theresa was dropped into the ocean, nuked, and then survived based off of Hal and also the fact that she had 12 Coke bottles in a garbage bag, whatever. Hal keeps her in this comatose state so that she stays alive, and she's just floating in the ocean, and sharks come to investigate, and Hal kills them, and then the blood attracts more sharks until there's just a sloshing mob of dead sharks. It's one of those little details that makes the tone of the story really, really weird, considering how absolutely grotesque and morbid the idea of a shark massacre is. You guys aren't ready for this, but I think this is a reference to the shark sermon in Moby Dick, where I think it was Stub or Starbuck. I can't remember. Those guys all mixed together. I don't know. I think it's some kind of metaphor for the voraciousness of man or something. But I think that's what Norman was going for here. Totally. Tommy. I don't know why I like this character so much, but he's up there with David Blair in terms of just my childish whimsy. This is Theresa's childhood friend that during that fun and game montage I was telling you about, he is playing catch with Theresa, which I just think is kind of nice. Definitely a different kind of tone in comparison to her, fighting North Korea or leading Israelis out of the Levant. Chipmunks. This is my favorite tier so far. Everything's been so cool. When Theresa is living with the Parkers in their estate, she learns that there are no chipmunks in Britain, which I guess is true. I don't know enough about small mammals in America versus Britain, but whatever, sure. So the Parkers build her a greenhouse, and she learns to feed and commune with these chipmunks like she's a Disney princess. And this whole time, there's this ticking alarm for the entire world starving, but I guess it's really important that Theresa has time with her chipmunks. To kill a mockingbird. This one's a deep cut, and I would say is kind of extraneous to the text, but I know what he's talking about here. In the writing forum where Norman first kind of started talking, he compared himself favorably to Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird. Something about stuffing a bunch of different events into one book. I'm not going to make a judgment call about either book, but if I were to pick one book to compare to Empress Theresa, I can guarantee you that it would not be To Kill a Mockingbird. But whatever, I don't know the full story behind that one. Honestly, I'm kind of interested in what these forums have to say. I feel like there's so much untapped Norm content out there. We'll see. Theresa's sister. Man, I would put this, below the bottom of the iceberg. Honestly, if you've read Empress Theresa, do you remember that Theresa has a sister? Because let me make sure. I'm pulling up the book right now to make sure that I'm correct, but I'm pretty sure that Theresa's sister doesn't show up after the first chapter. But let me make sure. Yeah, so her name's Catherine. And nope. She does not appear at any point after chapter 1. I hold on. Let me see if she uses epithets to describe Catherine, maybe sister or family. Okay, there's way too many families for me to go through this. Let's just assume that she never shows back up. On to the level of what would I call it? Most normal drone metal fan. Only 4 here, okay. Let's start with this one. Joan of Arc's hair. So we already talked a little bit about Norman's fixations, and I think that really, really holds true here. This is another one of those extra textual things where Norman Boutin has a fixation on Joan of Arc. And not to self-report, but I don't know too much about Catholicism, but I cannot imagine that this fixation on Joan of Arc is normal or honestly even precedented in Catholicism. But this is specifically in reference to a scene where Theresa has used her godlike influence to completely change the world to her desires, and she's uncovering all of these ancient artifacts, and she presents France with a lock of Joan of Arc's hair, proving that she did not burn to death, which I think is like physical evidence of a miracle or something. I'm not quite sure the importance of that. It moves the whatever president, king, I don't know what they use, of France to tears. I think to an extent, at least in Norman's mind, Theresa is based off of Joan of Arc. So this is kind of one of those emblematic moments that has a connection to the deep core of Empress Theresa. Channel 24, all Theresa, all the time. It's always been interesting to me, not only in Empress Theresa, but a lot of the politically bent books that we've read for the English Club podcast. The relationship that they have to the media is very, very arbitrary, I would say. What I mean by that is when Theresa is doing a good thing and people praise her, then the media is good. Or if the media shares an enemy with Theresa, then the media is good. But if Theresa does something good and the media doesn't like her, then the media is evil. It's just interesting because, like, the media is not a monolith, at least, that's what we're led to believe. And in all of these books, including Empress Theresa, that's never really taken into account. It's just capital T, capital M, the media. And we just like them or hate them depending on the time of day. I remember mentioning maybe it would be cool if there was an anti-Theresa movement, and having that as opposed to the pro-Theresa movement would kind of help smooth that out a little bit. But I don't think that we're going to have that level of nuance in a Empress Theresa verse story. So, Jesus. Skiing Jews. It's probably the funniest way you could put this one plot point, where Theresa is collaborating with the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Scherzer, about what to do about Israel and all of its enemies. And one of their first ideas is they are going to create... This is so bad. They're going to create an island in the shape of the Star of David. And it's going to have... Okay, no, wait. I cannot summarize this. I'm going to just read you the quote. Steve pulled out a crude drawing of an island. It was in the shape of the Star of David. This island will be 500 miles wide, which is something like 20 times the land area you have now, and every square inch will be fertile soil. Each arm of the star has 20,000-foot mountains to catch the rain and give you fresh water. They will also be the greatest ski resorts in the world. Kids like ski slopes more than rocks in the desert. Your tourist trade will explode. So that's what Joshua meant by that. I don't know why, but the idea of moving an entire country of people into an island shaped like the symbol of their religion, and you give them specifically 20,000 foot, not 19,999, mind you, 20,000 foot mountains for skiing is so funny to me. I just love it. Pilot Theresa. Okay, there is an extended scene that we talked about in the podcast where Theresa is back in a plane after, she's become queen of the world or whatever, and Hal, since she's in a plane, remembers when they tried to nuke her. So Hal puts everyone in the plane to sleep. So Theresa has to learn how to pilot, I think it's like a large commercial plane. She has to figure out, through talking to the air traffic control, how to land it. And, they have all these scenes of her crawling through the aisles, trying to get to the cockpit. And, I don't know how realistic that scene is, but I always find it inspiring. I fly a lot, and I've just kind of accepted in my heart that when I get on a plane and the pilot is incapacitated, that I will die. Like, I'm okay with that in my heart of hearts. and I don't think I would even try if something like that happened to me. So Theresa, in that regard, is really, an inspirational character. Oh my god. Beer tastes like so bad after you've been chewing gum. It's like brushing your teeth and then eating oranges. I don't know why I did that. That's gross. Talk about Moby Dick. This is kind of how Ishmael always looked in my head. I don't know why. But let's start out with the North Pole Eversplosion. Aside from being a very clever Xavier Renegade Angel reference, this is about when... So Theresa never fixes the problem with the wind outright. Like I said, she just keeps coming up with incremental fixes to the problems that she creates. Which, you always hear that writing advice of, what is it called? Yes, but, no, and. So I guess it follows narratively, but it's kind of hard not to be frustrated with her. With this specifically, she has been raising giant columns of water into the atmosphere to, I don't know, add rain back to the atmosphere or something. But that doesn't work for whatever reason. And this just happens for the rest of time, and that's how the problems created by the water columns are fixed. Just a constant, never-ending explosion on the North Pole. Theresa's uniform. This is kind of a little detail that I think is interesting from a gender and feminist perspective. When Theresa becomes a general or whatever she is, we see it on the cover, that is specifically a male's uniform. What does she say? She said, "I wanted the authoritative aura of a male," which I think is a little cis-sexist, but I don't know. Theresa's more conservative than me, so maybe she has a different opinion on the gender binary. The Army-Navy game. I have no idea why this is in the book. I don't know why Theresa wanted to do this. I don't know why Norman decided to write this. This is the one thing that I will say resolutely does not need to be in the book. Because, I'm not going to defend the North Korea saving, Israel island making, softball playing stuff that goes on, but she literally just plays football. And it's specifically the Army-Navy game. And maybe it's like, if you remember Avatar: The Last Airbender in the first season where there's a flashback and Aang learns he's the Avatar and then all his friends don't want to play with him anymore. I remember there was a little bit of that sense because she was talking about, I will give whichever team I'm on a massive advantage, but it doesn't really go anywhere, and not a lot of people talk about it, which I guess makes it more obscure. But also no one talks about it because it's not interesting and it doesn't do anything. Worldwide nap time. At the very end of Empress Theresa, 204, I think, howls descend from the sky and merge with random people. And Theresa is terrified that this means that a bunch of people are going to be running around with powers analogous to hers. Her solution in this situation, and everyone goes along with this, is to put the entire world to sleep. And I think she does it for hundreds and hundreds of years. She unlocks all the secrets of the universe. Her and Steve have 300 unnamed children that she keeps in a constant state of prepubescence. And then when everyone wakes up, Theresa's ready to move on into a new age of peace and prosperity under her rule. We are now achieving enlightenment. We are in the deep depths of the ocean. Finally, we are ready to see the world for what it is. Let's start here with Chicago Everlympics. So for some reason, it's very, very important from the Olympic Games standpoint that Theresa has made it so it's only one season all year round. Why this one institution was chosen to represent that complication, I don't know, but for whatever reason, she decides to have the Olympics in Chicago forever. And I think she does some terraforming. Let me see. Yeah. So she creates an Olympic island in Lake Michigan. I don't know why. Like, that's even more obscure than the Army-Navy game. Like, who cares, Theresa, about the stupid Olympics? It's just so funny. Amazon review fights are guerrilla marketing. This is a theory that I subscribe wholly to. I have no frame of reference for what Norman Boutin is like as a person, and all I have to go on are forum posts or his website. And the neat thing about the internet, and let me get on my soapbox real quick, and this is to save your mental health. If there is something that you see and it makes you feel any emotion other than quiet amusement for longer than 3 seconds, assume it is guerrilla marketing. Now, I don't have any evidence to support this other than the statistical fact that it's probably true, but I am convinced that Norman Boutin is a marketing genius and was projecting this version of himself in order to garner attention and to make money off of his book. Because statistically, if something pisses you off, it is intended to piss you off. And you can insert whatever institution or person, whether it's a federal government or a guy out in Vermont, and you will probably be correct. Finally, in our glimpse of the lands beyond, we have rake arm evolution. So people like to talk about how Theresa got her howl powers from a fox, but I don't think it's talked about often enough. The mentality that Hal allegedly had for giving Theresa specifically those powers. It is randomly decided, and I guess just taken as fact, that the fox and by process Hal had seen Theresa's mother holding a rake and assumed that this was an extra appendage, thus implying that she was a more advanced species. I don't know. I loved the idea of Hal being stupid and making only very base assumptions, but at the same time, like, centipedes exist. If the measurement of sapience is limbs, then there are a lot of insects that have us completely beat. All right, guys, we have reached the final level. The fires of heaven are raging, the wheels are spinning, the eyes are open, and the crown has been returned to its proper place. With all of this knowledge, we will be completely, fully realized in our Empress Theresa scholarship. So let's talk about Middle East terraforming. So Theresa's solution to the problems in the Middle East are largely geographic in nature. It's her belief that it is because of the lack of mountains that there are terrorists in the Middle East, which I'm not even going to touch. There are a lot of reasons for terrorism to exist. Some may be geographical, but I would not tell you that the main causes of the problems in the Middle East are due to the lack of mountains. But Theresa does that, and it seems to kind of alleviate some of those problems. So I guess, what do I know? Hal controls minds. This is, what would you call this? This is Daddy's Empress Theresa hot take. So I don't think I need to tell you this, and I don't think it's a particular ad hominem attack to say that the characters in Empress Theresa act very, very strangely. Now, here's the problem. We don't have any insight into what the world was like before Hal was in Theresa. Everything in the narration is being done ostensibly ex post facto, so For all we know, the world was exactly like ours and exactly as rational as ours, and then Hal started subtly influencing the minds of the humans around Theresa, which would explain the cognitive dissonance in everyone praising her, which would explain how her stupid ideas always seem to work out in the end. Everything kind of comes together very, very squarely. Unironically, I think this is a theory worth investigation, and if we were to ever find out that Norman Boutin was a giant psyop, it would be interesting to see if he actually intentionally had it do this. Shaggy God story. Man, I already used the daddy's hot take thing. What would this be? This is, whatever, I don't have a joke for this. This is the galaxy brain theory behind Empress Theresa. So, remember how I said that she had like 300 children and they were the ones that spread enlightenment throughout the earth? Well, I was actually lying. There were actually only 2 children, a boy and a girl, and their names, Adam and Eve. Nah, I'm just messing with you, but doesn't it seem like something Norman would do? But I do think that this is a funny hot take, is that, maybe this is 2000 BC, and these 200 unnamed children are, the first, Neanderthals that will eventually become the human race. And finally, everyone, we have the Parker children. This, like Theresa's sister, is an instance of characters who would seem to be important, but are always just in the background, never quite acknowledged by the narrative. And something about these children was always deeply, deeply sinister to me. They were a little bit too prim and proper, and given my other theories about Empress Theresa, I wonder if they don't have a larger role in the story after all. All I'm saying is the Parker children are the key to all of this. I don't care what you say. And that's it, guys. This was really fun, honestly. I'm really nostalgic for Empress Theresa. It was our first book for the podcast, and I think we're coming up on the 2nd year anniversary of it. And I don't know, it'll always hold a really special place in my heart. Like I mentioned in the Sonic High School video, I don't ironically like Empress Theresa. It has become something that I'm a genuine fan of. And I like it, It's silly and stupid, and there are a bunch of things you can just point at and laugh, but who needs everything to be serious and erudite and boring all the time? Like, this is fun. So yeah, we're still reading our next book for the podcast. I have some new ideas for videos to make. If you're not already, be sure to subscribe, because there's a lot of stuff coming down in the pipeline that I'm really excited about. Every comment, DM, email I get is like super crazy to even wrap my head around. And it's been really fun talking with you guys about all the crazy stuff that you come across in weird books. So yeah, see you next time.